5:14 a.m. That's the exact time my life imploded. I remember staring at my phone, the harsh blue light illuminating our cabin bedroom, while Lisa slept peacefully beside me. Outside, the Colorado mountains stood indifferent, silent witnesses to my unraveling. The email was brief, almost casual. Jack, your services are no longer required at Nexus Technologies. HR will contact you regarding exit procedures. After 15 years of missed dinners, postponed vacations, and endless overtime, I was fired via email because I missed one status update. 1. To continue hearing this beautiful and special story, please like and subscribe to the channel. Write your name and the city you're watching from, so I can include a special greeting for you in my next story. I had to read it twice, then 3 times. My hands started shaking, and I felt a cold sweat break out across my forehead. This had to be some kind of mistake. I had given everything to Nexus Technologies. I'd helped build it from a struggling startup into a tech powerhouse. Hell, I'd personally secured the Westcorp deal that had saved the company during the last recession. And now, I was being discarded like yesterday's trash because of one missed update on the Hartman project. The irony was suffocating. This was our first real vacation in 3 years. Lisa had practically begged me to come to this cabin, to disconnect for once. The mountains will still be here next year, she'd say each time I postponed. But I'd always find some excuse, an important client, a critical deadline, a major presentation. Work had always come first. Always. So David Hensley, the CEO I'd loyally served since day one, could fire me at dawn without so much as a phone call. I slipped out of bed, careful not to wake Lisa. She deserved at least one more day of peace before I shattered our world with this news. I made coffee with trembling hands and stepped onto the cabin's deck. The sun was just beginning to paint the pine trees gold. It was going to be a beautiful day in the Rockies, the kind of day that normally restores your faith in everything. But all I could feel was an emptiness expanding inside me, quickly filling with something darker. Betrayal. The first person I called was Tom Winters, my closest ally at Nexus. It was still early, but I knew he'd be up for his morning run. He answered on the 4th ring, breathless. Jack, aren't you supposed to be communing with nature or something? Tom, they fired me. My voice sounded strange, detached. Over email. At 5 in the morning, the silence that followed told me everything. He knew. Jesus, Jack. I'm sorry. I just found out yesterday afternoon. Hensley called an emergency executive meeting. Said you'd been consistently neglecting your responsibilities. Brought up the missed update as the final straw. Final straw? What are you talking about? I've never missed a deadline, not once in 15 years. Tom's voice dropped. They've been building a case. Hensley's been saying you're not a culture fit anymore. Not a culture fit. I was the culture. I'd shaped the damn culture. It's politics, Jack. Ever since Hensley brought in those new board members, things have been changing. They want younger faces, people they can mold. You ask too many questions. Push back too much. I closed my eyes. The Colorado sun suddenly too bright, too cheerful. So that's it? 15 years and I'm out because I'm not moldable enough. There's more. Tom hesitated. They've already replaced you. With Trevor Miller. Trevor Miller. The 29-year-old wunderkind I'd personally mentored. The kid I'd advocated for, promoted, taught everything I knew. The betrayal twisted deeper. I gotta go, Jack. They're watching all of us closely now. Anyone associated with you is under scrutiny. I'm sorry, man. I really am. The line went dead, and I stood frozen on that beautiful deck, surrounded by wilderness, feeling more alone than I'd ever felt in my life. Inside, I heard Lisa stirring. How was I going to tell her? Our mortgage, our lifestyle, our plans, everything had been built around my position at Nexus. My salary, my stock options. The thought hit me like a lightning bolt. I still owned a significant chunk of Nexus, nearly, at current valuation, worth about $4.2 million. They might have taken my job, but they couldn't take those shares. Not yet, anyway. And that's when the idea first formed. A dangerous, reckless idea that would have been unthinkable 24 hours earlier. But then again, 24 hours earlier, I was still Jack Miller, Executive Vice President of Nexus Technologies. Now I was just another middle-aged man, with a pink slip and a growing thirst for retribution. Lisa took the news better than I expected. That's the thing about her. When the world crumbles, she finds the strength I sometimes lack. "We'll figure it out, Jack," she said, holding my face in her hands. "This isn't the end. Maybe it's a beginning." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. I didn't tell her about the rage building inside me, the humiliation that burned like acid. I didn't mention the plan taking shape in my mind, the plan that would violate every ethical principle I'd claimed to uphold throughout my career. We decided to cut our vacation short. I needed to get home, to face this crisis head-on. The 6-hour drive from Aspen to Denver was mostly silent. I kept checking my phone, half expecting an apology, a retraction, something that would make sense of this madness. But there was nothing. By the time we reached our house in Cherry Creek, I had made my decision. But I needed to be smart about this. Methodical. If Nexus could discard me without a second thought, I could return the favor. That night, after Lisa had fallen asleep, I sat in my home office, staring at my computer screen. I pulled up the confidentiality agreements I'd signed over the years. They restricted me from working for competitors for 18 months, from sharing proprietary information ever. But there was nothing, absolutely nothing, that prevented me from selling my shares to whomever I pleased. And I knew exactly who would be most interested. Hyperion Systems had been Nexus's chief rival for a decade. We'd battled for the same clients, poached each other's talent, undercut each other's bids. Their CEO, Richard Faulkner, had tried to hire me away 3 times over the years. I'd always declined, citing loyalty to Nexus. Loyalty. The word tasted bitter now. I drafted an email to Faulkner. Simple, direct, "Richard, circumstances have changed. I'd like to discuss my Nexus holdings with you. Discretion is paramount." Before I could second-guess myself, I hit send. Then I leaned back in my chair, heart racing. There was no going back now. The response came within minutes, despite it being nearly midnight. "Jack, sorry to hear about today's events. Call me directly tomorrow. My cell 31. News travels fast in our incestuous little industry. Everyone would know by morning that Jack Miller, the faithful company man, had been unceremoniously dumped after 15 years of service. Well, let them talk. Soon they'd have something else to discuss. Richard Faulkner wasn't what I expected. We met at a nondescript coffee shop in Boulder, far from the prying eyes of the Denver tech scene. He was older than me by maybe a decade, with silver hair and the relaxed demeanor of someone who'd been in the game long enough to know it's all temporary. 15 years is a hell of a run these days, he said, stirring his black coffee. Most executives barely make it past 3 before they're looking for the next stepping stone. I believed in loyalty, I replied, the bitterness evident in my voice. And they repaid that loyalty by firing you over email, because you missed a status update while on vacation. He shook his head. That's not just bad form, Jack. That's bad business. I studied him carefully. Why are you really interested in my shares, Rich? 3% isn't going to give you control of anything. He smiled, and I glimpsed the shrewd businessman beneath the avuncular exterior. 3% from you, 2% from Jenkins, when he retired last year. Another 2 that we've accumulated through various channels. It adds up, Jack. And with the right timing. You're planning a hostile takeover. It wasn't a question. Let's call it an aggressive restructuring opportunity. His eyes gleamed. Nexus is vulnerable. Hensley's new direction has alienated key personnel, you being the most notable example. Their last 2 product launches underperformed, and I happen to know their biggest client, Westcorp, is reconsidering their contract. That was news to me. Westcorp was their bread and butter. If they jumped ship, Nexus would be in serious trouble. How do you know that? Because Westcorp has been in preliminary talks with us for 3 months. He leaned forward. They were waiting to see what happened with you actually. Your relationship with their CEO was a major factor in their loyalty to Nexus. The revelation hit me hard. I'd built that relationship from nothing. Countless dinners, golf games, personal attention to their needs, and Hensley had just thrown it away. So you want my shares to help push through a takeover. Then what? Dismantle Nexus? Fire everyone? Richard sat back, looking almost offended. Is that what you think of me? No, Jack. I want to merge our companies. Keep the best parts of both. There would be redundancies. Yes, but nothing like the bloodbath you're imagining. He paused. And I'd want you involved. Me? I laughed bitterly. I'm damaged goods. Richard, the executive who got fired over a missed email. No, he said firmly. You're the executive who built Nexus's client relationships from the ground up, who secured the Westcorp deal that saved them during the recession, who mentored their brightest talent. He leaned in again. And who they were stupid enough to discard because you finally took a vacation after 3 years of non-stop work. Put like that, I almost felt like I had value again. Almost. What's your offer for the shares? Market value plus 20%. I raised an eyebrow. 30. He smiled. 25 and a guaranteed 2-year contract, with Hyperion post-merger at your current salary plus 10%. I considered it. The money was more than fair. But this wasn't really about money anymore. I want a condition, I said finally. When the takeover happens, I want to be the one to tell Hensley. Richard studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Revenge is an expensive luxury, Jack. But in this case, I think we can afford it. We shook hands, and just like that, I'd crossed a line I never thought I would. I was no longer Jack Miller, loyal company man. I was Jack Miller, corporate mercenary. And it felt surprisingly good. The transaction happened quickly. Richard's lawyers were efficient, discreet. Within 48 hours, my Nexus shares had been transferred to a shell company controlled by Hyperion. The money, just over $5.2 million after the premium, sat in my account, a digital confirmation of my betrayal. I told Lisa everything. I owed her that much. She listened without interruption as I explained the deal, the planned takeover, my new arrangement with Hyperion. Are you sure this is what you want? She asked when I finished. Not the money or the new job. Those make sense, but the revenge part. Needing to be the one to tell Hensley. He fired me at dawn while I was on vacation, I said, feeling the anger rise again. After 15 years. I know, she took my hand. And it was cruel and unprofessional. And you have every right to be angry. But this feels different. Like you're letting them change who you are. Her words hit uncomfortably close to home. Was I becoming someone else? Someone driven by vengeance, rather than the principles I'd always claimed to value? I just need to see his face, I said finally. When he realizes what's happening, when he understands that actions have consequences. Lisa didn't look convinced, but she didn't push further. That night, I dreamed of confronting Hensley, of watching his smug confidence crumble as I revealed my role in Hyperion's takeover. I woke up feeling unsettled, the satisfaction in the dream hollow and strained. The next day, I received a call from an unknown number. It was Sandra Chen, Nexus's chief financial officer and someone I'd considered a friend. You sold your shares, she said without preamble. Not angry, just stating a fact. How did you know? The transfer should have been invisible through the shell company. Because I've been tracking unusual activity. Too many shares moving to too many anonymous entities. I'm not stupid, Jack. This has Hyperion written all over it. I said nothing, which was confirmation. And look, I don't blame you, she continued, surprising me. What they did to you was wrong. Hensley's been making increasingly bad decisions lately. That's actually why I'm calling. I'm listening. There's more happening at Nexus than you know. The company's in trouble, Jack. Real trouble. The Hartman project is failing. That status update you missed? It would have told you that their integrated system is fundamentally flawed. We've been hiding it from the client, but it's going to blow up soon. My mind raced. The Hartman project was massive. A complete digital transformation for one of the largest healthcare providers in the country. If it failed, the fallout would be catastrophic. Why are you telling me this? Because despite what Hensley thinks, you're not the problem. You've been papering over the cracks for years, keeping clients happy while the internal rot spreads. She paused. And because there are people here who still believe in the company we built together. People who think it's worth saving, even if that means drastic change. Like a Hyperion takeover, I said slowly. Like new leadership, she countered. Hensley needs to go. The board needs restructuring. We need to refocus on our core strengths instead of chasing every shiny new market segment. And you think Richard Faulkner will do that? I think a combined Hyperion Nexus could be stronger than either company alone, but only with the right people guiding the integration. She paused. People like you, Jack. The conversation left me reeling. What had started as a simple act of revenge was evolving into something far more complex. I wasn't just selling shares to hurt Hensley anymore. I was potentially helping reshape an entire company, my company, in many ways. But it also meant acknowledging an uncomfortable truth. Maybe this wasn't just about one missed status update. Maybe Nexus had been headed for trouble for a long time, and I'd been too busy, too loyal, too unquestioning to see it. 3 days after my conversation with Sandra, I met with Richard Faulkner again, this time at Hyperion's Denver offices. The takeover plan was accelerating. They now controlled nearly 14% of Nexus's shares and were positioning for a board challenge within the month. We need to talk about the Hartman project, I said, as soon as we were alone in his office. Richard's expression remained carefully neutral. What about it? It's failing. The integrated system has fundamental flaws. Nexus has been hiding it from the client. He studied me for a long moment. You didn't know. It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. No, not until recently. Would you have allowed that? The hiding from the client part? The question caught me off guard. Of course not. I've always been transparent with clients, even when it meant admitting we'd made mistakes. And yet it happened under your watch. The accusation stung because it was true. I had been so focused on securing new deals, maintaining growth, that I'd lost sight of what was happening within the company. Had I become part of the problem without realizing? I trusted the wrong people, I said finally. I should have been more involved in the technical aspects. Richard nodded slowly. The problem with success, Jack, is that it makes us comfortable, complacent. We start to believe our own myth, that we're indispensable, that our way is the only way. He leaned forward. Maybe getting fired was the best thing that could have happened to you. The suggestion made me bristle. Being humiliated by email at dawn is never the best thing, Rich. The method was inexcusable, he acknowledged. But the wake-up call? Maybe that was overdue. I wanted to argue, to defend my 15 years of dedication. But a small honest part of me wondered if he was right. Had I become too comfortable, too set in my way, too willing to trust the system I'd helped build, even as it began to fail? If when the merger happens, Richard continued, we'll need to address the Hartman situation immediately. Full disclosure to the client, a realistic assessment of what can be salvaged, and a clear path forward. They'll sue, I pointed out. The contract has massive penalty clauses for delays and non-performance. Yes, they probably will, and will deserve it. He held my gaze. But it's the right thing to do. The only thing to do if we want to build something that lasts. It was exactly what I would have said, once upon a time, before I became more concerned with growth metrics than with the quality of our work, before I started missing the warning signs. As I drove home that evening, I found myself confronting uncomfortable truth. Yes, Hensley and the board had treated me shabbily. Yes, I deserved better after 15 years of service. But I wasn't entirely blameless in this situation. I'd helped create a culture that valued appearance over substance, that rewarded those who said yes rather than those who raised concern. Trevor Miller, the young man who'd replaced me, had I really mentored him, or had I just taught him to play the game the way I played it? Had I shown him how to build relationships with clients, or just how to tell them what they wanted to hear? For the first time since that 5:14 a.m. email, I felt something besides anger and betrayal. I felt responsibility. Not for being fired, that remained an unwarranted cruelty, but for some of what had gone wrong at Nexus, for looking the other way when I should have looked close. When I got home, Lisa was waiting with a glass of wine and a sympathetic ear. I told her everything about the Hartman project, about my conversation with Richard, about my growing realization that I had played a part in Nexus's problems. So what does this mean for your revenge plan? She asked after I'd finished. I sighed, suddenly tired. I don't know anymore. It felt so simple at first. They hurt me so I'd hurt them back. But now you're seeing the bigger picture, she finished for me. The way you always do, Jack. It's one of the things I've always loved about you. You might get knocked down, but you always get up with a clearer vision. Her faith in me was humbling. Had I really been that person? Could I be that person again? I think I said slowly that I need to focus less on hurting Hensley and more on fixing what's broken. If that's even possible, she smiled. A genuine smile that reached her eyes. Now that sounds like the Jack Miller I married. A week later, I was in my home office reviewing Hyperion's preliminary integration plans for Nexus, when my phone rang. The caller ID showed a name I never expected to see again. David Hensley. My finger hovered over the decline button. Why would I want to talk to the man who'd fired me by email at dawn? But curiosity won out. David, I answered, keeping my voice neutral. Jack. He sounded tired, older somehow. I think we need to talk. About what? My consistently neglecting my responsibilities. Or maybe my failure to be a culture fit. A heavy sigh. I deserve that. Look, can we meet in person? There are things I need to say that shouldn't be over the phone. Part of me wanted to refuse, to make him feel the same dismissal he'd shown me. But another part, the part that had been doing a lot of reflecting lately, was curious. Fine. The coffee shop on Pearl Street. 1 hour. I arrived early, choosing a table in the corner where we wouldn't be easily overheard. Hensley arrived exactly on time, looking significantly more haggard than when I'd last seen him 3 weeks earlier. The confident CEO swagger was gone, replaced by the careful movements of a man carrying a heavy burden. Thank you for meeting me, he said, sliding into the seat across from me. What do you want, David? He looked down at his hands, then back up at me. First, to apologize. The way you were terminated was unacceptable. Inexcusable. It shouldn't have happened that way. But it did. Yes, he nodded. It did. And I bear responsibility for that, even though I didn't send the email myself. That was news to me. You didn't? No, it came from HR, acting on instructions from the board. By the time I found out, it was already done. He ran a hand through his hair. That's not an excuse. I should have called you immediately, explained things properly. But I was a coward. I studied him, trying to reconcile this humble man with the arrogant CEO I'd worked under for 15 years. Why am I really here, David? I doubt you asked to meet just to ease your conscience. He gave a sad smile. Always direct. That's one of the things I always valued about you, Jack, even when it was inconvenient. He leaned forward. I know about Hyperion, the share acquisitions, the planned board challenge. I know you sold your shares to them. I said nothing, waiting. I don't blame you, he continued. After how things ended, I'd probably have done the same. But I need you to understand something. This isn't just about you and me, or even about Nexus versus Hyperion. There are 500 employees whose livelihoods are at stake. Employees you were perfectly willing to mislead about the Hartman project. I countered. He flinched visibly. You know about that. I do. And it's exactly the kind of thing I would have prevented if I'd been properly involved in the project. If you and the board hadn't been so determined to sideline me. You're right. The admission surprised me. I made serious mistakes, tried to cover up problems instead of addressing them, pushed away the voices of caution in favor of those who told us what we wanted to hear. He met my eyes directly. People like Trevor Miller, the mention of my replacements, sent a fresh wave of bitterness through me. He was always good at telling people exactly what they wanted to hear. Yes, and I finally realized that's not what I need. Hensley took a deep breath. Jack, I want you to come back to Nexus. I almost laughed. Are you serious? After everything that's happened, completely serious. The board has agreed to step back from operational decisions. I've already begun discussions with Hartman about the system issues. Full disclosure, no more hiding. And I want you to oversee the reset. As what? Your fall guy when it all goes wrong? He shook his head. As president and CEO, with a clear path to CEO within 18 months when I stepped down. The offer was so unexpected that for a moment, I couldn't respond. When I finally found my voice, it was heavy with skepticism. Why would you do this? Why now? Because Nexus is in trouble, and you're the only one who can fix it. Because I made a terrible mistake in letting you go, and because I'd rather see you help rebuild Nexus than watch Hyperion dismantle it. His eyes were pleading now. You built this company too, Jack. Are you really ready to see it torn apart? The question hit home. Despite everything, I did care about Nexus, about the people there, the work we'd done, the potential still unrealized. But could I trust Hensley? Could I go back to a place that had discarded me so callously? I need time to think, I said finally. And I'd need certain guarantees. Written, legally binding guarantees. Hope flickered across his face. Of course. Whatever you need. Just think about it, Jack. Please. As I watched him leave, I realized I was facing a decision, I never expected to make. Return to Nexus as its potential savior, or continue with Hyperion and be part of its dismantling. And what did it either choice say about who I was becoming? That night, I couldn't sleep. I paced our living room until Lisa finally came downstairs around 2 a.m., wrapping herself in her robe. "Talk to me," she said simply, curling up on the couch. I explained Hensley's unexpected offer. The choice now before me: return to Nexus, or continue with Hyperion. "What does your gut tell you?" she asked when I'd finished. I sat beside her, exhausted. "That I don't trust either option. Hensley's desperate. Who knows if his promises would hold once the crisis passes. And Richard, I think he'd keep me around as long as I was useful. But Hyperion's corporate culture is ruthless. There would be no loyalty there either. So maybe you need a third option." I looked at her. "What do you mean?" "Jack, you've been in corporate America for 20 years. You've built relationships with clients, vendors, talented people. You have capital now, both financial and social." She took my hand. "Maybe it's time to build something of your own. Something that reflects your values, not someone else's." The thought was simultaneously exhilarating and terrifying. Start my own company. At 42, with a mortgage and the comfortable identity of corporate executive I'd worn for so long, I wouldn't even know where to begin. I admit, "Yes, you would." Her confidence in me was unwavering. "You'd begin with what you know is broken in the industry, with the gaps you've seen that no one is filling, with the clients who trust you personally, not just the company you represent." We talked until dawn, possibilities expanding with the morning light. By the time the sun fully rose, I had the outline of a plan, not just for my career, but for the kind of business I wanted to build. One founded on transparency, on sustainable growth rather than hyperbolic projections, on valuing people as assets rather than costs. At 8 a.m., I called Richard Faulkner. "I need to meet with you today," I said. "There's been a development." He agreed to see me. Before heading to his office, I made a second call to Sandra Chen at Nexus. "Sandra, it's Jack. I need a favor." 3 hours later, I sat across from Richard, in the now familiar setting of his corner office. This time, however, I wasn't there as a potential employee or revenge-seeking former executive. I was there with a proposition. "David Hensley offered me my job back," I began. "Actually, a better job. President and COO, with a path to..." Richard's expression remained calm, but I caught the flicker of concern in his eyes. "I assume you're telling me this because you're considering it." "I considered it, and I'm declining." Relief crossed his face. "Good. Our plans are proceeding well." Within 3 weeks, I held up a hand to stop him. "I'm not accepting your offer either, Richard." Now he looked genuinely surprised. "May I ask why? I thought we had an understanding." "We did, but I've realized there's a better way forward. For everyone involved." I leaned forward. "I want you to halt the takeover plans." He laughed, though there was little humor in it. "After all the work we've done, all the shares we've accumulated, why would I do that?" "Because I'm offering you something better than a messy, expensive, hostile takeover that will destroy value and alienate clients." I laid out a folder on his desk. "I'm offering you a partnership." Skeptically, he opened the folder and began reviewing the documents inside: a preliminary term sheet for a joint venture between Hyperion and Nexus, focusing specifically on the healthcare sector, with a new entity to be formed that would rescue the troubled Hartman project. "This unexpected," Richard said finally, looking up from the papers. "Nexus has stronger client relationships in healthcare, but has fumbled the technical execution. Hyperion has better technical capabilities, but hasn't been able to penetrate the healthcare market effectively." I gestured to the proposal. "Together, as partners rather than conquerors, and conquered, you could dominate the sector." "And where do you fit into this scenario?" "I would head the joint venture for the first 2 years, reporting to a board comprised of equal representatives from both companies. After that, assuming success, I'd transition to an advisory role." Richard leaned back, studying me with new respect. "And Hensley?" "He's agreed to that conditionally. He and the Nexus board will approve it, if you agree to halt the takeover attempt and convert your share purchases into a minority stake in the joint venture." "You've been busy," he observed. negotiating all this behind the scenes. I nod. I've learned that sometimes the best solution isn't winning or losing. It's finding a third option that lets everyone move forward. Richard was silent for a long moment, then smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. Jack Miller, corporate diplomat. I have to admit, I didn't see this coming. He tapped the folder. I'll need my team to review this, of course. There would be adjustments, negotiation, of course. But the framework is sound. Better than a takeover for all concerned. Including you, he noted. You get to run your own show without the baggage of either company's internal politics. I didn't deny it. I've earned the right to set some terms of my own. He nodded slowly. Yes, I believe you have. He extended his hand across the desk. Let's explore this third option of yours, Jack. It's certainly more interesting than what I had planned. As we shook hands, I felt something I hadn't experienced since that 5:14 a.m. email 3 weeks earlier. Hope, not just for my career or financial future, but for the possibility of building something worthwhile from the ashes of betrayal. 2 days later, I found myself back in the Nexus Technologies headquarters for the first time since my firing. The familiar glass and steel building that had been my second home for 15 years now felt like a foreign country, one where I'd once held citizenship but now required a visa to enter. The security guard did a double take when I approached the desk. Mr. Miller, I mean, welcome back, sir. He hurriedly printed a visitor badge. Just visiting today, Carl, I said, accepting the badge with a smile. Hensley was waiting in the conference room on the executive floor, along with Sandra Chen and 2 board members. The tension was palpable as I took my seat across from them. Thank you for coming in, Jack, Hensley began, the formality strange between us after so many years. Sandra tells me you've put together an alternative proposal to the Hyperion situation. I have. I placed copies of the joint venture proposal on the table. Richard Faulkner has tentatively agreed to halt the takeover attempt in favor of this partnership. His legal team is reviewing the terms now. The board members exchanged glances as they flipped through the document. Sandra gave me a subtle nod of approval. This is unexpected, one of the board members said, echoing Richard's initial reaction. But potentially brilliant, Sandra added. It addresses our technical shortfalls in healthcare, while preserving our client relationships, and it creates a firewall around the Hartman situation, containing both the risk and the opportunity. Hensley was studying me rather than the proposal. And you would run this joint venture. For 2 years, I confirmed. After that, its future would depend on its success. Convenient for you, he observed, a hint of the old bitterness creeping into his voice. You get to walk away from the mess here and start fresh. I met his gaze directly. The mess here, as you put it, includes firing me by email at 5:14 in the morning because I missed one status update while on vacation. So yes, I'd say I've earned the right to some distance. The board members looked uncomfortable. Clearly they hadn't known the details of my termination. What guarantee do we have that once this joint venture is established, Hyperion won't simply resume its takeover plans? One of them asked. The agreement includes a standstill provision. Hyperion commits to not increasing its ownership stake in Nexus for 5 years. In return, Nexus grants them 2 board seats and commits to the joint venture for the same period. And if the joint venture fails, the other board member pressed, then we all have bigger problems than ownership structures. I replied evenly. The Hartman project is in critical condition. This is the best chance to save it and to protect both companies from the fallout if it can't be saved. Hensley was still watching me, something unreadable in his expression. Finally he spoke. May I have a moment alone with Jack? Sandra and the board members looked surprised but complied, gathering their papers and filing out of the room. When the door closed behind them, Hensley let out a long breath. This isn't what I offered you, he said quietly. No, it isn't. I offered you a way back, a chance to reclaim what was taken from you. I shook my head. What was taken can't be reclaimed, David. The trust is gone, on both sides, I think. He didn't deny it, so instead, you've engineered this compromise. Not a victory for either Nexus or Hyperion, but not a defeat either. It's not about winning or losing anymore. It's about finding a path forward that creates value instead of destroying it. Hensley leaned back in his chair, suddenly looking every one of his 57 years. When did you get so wise, Jack? I don't remember you being this philosophical when you were fighting for that corner office on the executive floor. The question made me pause. When had I changed? Was it the shock of that 5:14 a.m. email? The conversations with Lisa? The realization that I'd been complicit in some of what had gone wrong at Nexus? I think, I said slowly, that sometimes you need to lose something to understand what matters. I lost my job, my professional identity, my belief in corporate loyalty, but I gained perspective. Hensley nodded, a hint of sadness in his eyes. I've lost things too, my confidence, the board's trust, the conviction that I know what's best for this company. He gestured to the proposal on the table. Maybe this is what we all need, a new beginning, even if it's not the one any of us imagined. Does that mean you'll support it? Yes. He extended his hand across the table. For what it's worth, Jack, I am sorry about how things ended, about not having the courage to face you directly. I hesitated for just a moment before taking his hand. The anger that had fueled me these past weeks was still there, but diminished now, overshadowed by something else, a determination to build rather than destroy. For what it's worth, I replied. I'm sorry too, for not seeing what was happening at Nexus, for becoming part of the problem instead of the solution. As we shook hands, I realized that this, not the revenge fantasy I'd initially imagined, was the true resolution I needed. Not forgiveness exactly, but recognition of mistakes on both sides, and a chance to do better going forward. 6 months later, I stood in the new offices of Meridian Health Partners, the name we'd chosen for the joint venture between Nexus and Hyperion. The space was still taking shape around us, but already it felt different from either parent company. More open, more collaborative, reflecting the culture I was determined to build. The Hartman project had been our first and most urgent challenge. As expected, the client had been furious when we finally disclosed the full extent of the problems. There had been threats of lawsuits, cancellation, public denunciation, but in the end, our transparency, painful as it was, had created an opening for a reset. We'd assembled a combined team from both companies, supplemented by new hires, who brought fresh perspectives. Together, we'd reimagined the approach, scaling back the initial ambitions to focus on delivering core functionality that actually worked. 6 months in, we were behind the original schedule, but making real progress. Progress the client could see and verify through our new open development process. Lisa joined me at the window, overlooking downtown Denver. It's really happening, isn't it? She said, slipping her arm through mine. It is. I still marveled at it sometimes. This unexpected third act in my career, born from what had felt like its ending. Are you happy, Jack? Really happy? I considered the question seriously. The past 6 months had been the most challenging of my professional life. Building something new, navigating the politics of 2 parent companies, managing a team with divided loyalties and competing cultures. None of it had been easy, but it had been meaningful. Every decision, every hire, every policy we established reflected the lessons I'd learned from my own failures and those I'd witnessed. Transparency was non-negotiable. Work-life balance was real, not just PR talking points. Difficult conversations happened face-to-face, not by email at dawn. I said finally. Not because it's perfect or easy, but because it matters, because we're building something that reflects values I actually believe in, not just whatever will drive the stock price next quarter. Lisa smiled. That's worth getting fired for, I think. Definitely worth getting fired for, I agreed, though I could have done without the 5:14 a.m. email part. My phone buzzed with a calendar reminder. My weekly check-in with David Hensley and Richard Faulkner, the parents of our joint venture, as the team jokingly called them. The 2 former rivals had developed an unexpected rapport over the months, their complementary strengths creating a dynamic that benefited both companies. Go, Lisa said, noticing the reminder. Keep building your bridge between enemies. As I walked to the conference room, I reflected on the strange journey that had brought me here. From loyal company man, to vengeful outcast, to whatever I was now, builder, maybe, creator of a third path when the obvious ones led nowhere good. I couldn't say I was grateful for that 5:14 a.m. email that had shattered my world. The humiliation and betrayal had been real, the pain genuine, but I could acknowledge that from that devastating moment had come something unexpected, the chance to rediscover what mattered to me professionally, to build a company culture I truly believed in, to create something that might actually. Sometimes it seemed, you have to lose everything to find a better way forward. The key is being willing to look for it, even when anger and revenge seem so much more satisfying. I opened the conference room door, ready for whatever came next. Because this time, I wasn't just following someone else's vision, or fighting for a corner office. I was building something that reflected the best of what I'd learned, including the painful lessons throughout my career, and that I was discovering made all the difference.